Hello and welcome back to Colin's Eclectic Channel. In the last video we were taking a look at these first 12 books that were under the Target imprint, that were novelisations of Doctor Who serials from the 60s and early 70s. The 3 William Hartnell ones from 73, then published in 74, these John Pertwee titles published in this order, up to the end of 74 with the first Patrick Troughton one, and then 75 began with a Pertwee and a Troughton. The titles are The Daleks, The Zarbi and The Crusaders, representing 3 stories that were in the 60s every week, early 60s every week had a different title, not an overall title, so those titles were chosen. But then an interesting decision in the early John Pertwee range was to change the titles from TV to book. The Spearhead from Space became The Auton Invasion. On TV, the Solarians became, in book form, The Cave Monsters. Colony in Space became The Doomsday Weapon. And finally, just down here, the Cybermen was actually the TV serial The Moonbase. But by this point the pattern was starting to emerge that most of the time they would stick to the title that the TV serial had. Now I suspect originally they changed it for marketing purposes to have a title with more impact on a book display, but maybe afterwards they changed it to the TV serial because they realised their main audience were people who wanted to relive the TV serial. And that takes us to where we're going with this particular video, which is the impact for children in that era of having these books available in this form. To put it in some kind of context, television at the time was rarely repeated, and certainly a programme like this. If you saw a Doctor Who episode and loved it, great, but you'd never see it again as far as you knew, apart from maybe the odd kind of abbreviated Christmas version of a selected story. By and large, you've seen it the only time you ever will. If you've missed it, you've missed it. That's the world that we knew. Television was hardly the be-all and end-all, and was rarely repeated. But if you were sad to have missed something, or you wanted to relive it, along came these books, and the opportunity was there. Now obviously this is hardly a representation of all the TV output. Got 6 years worth of 60s programs, for example. I think they did eventually all get published, but these initial 12 obviously represent a narrower range, and the fact that they focus mainly on John Pertwee's Doctor is a reflection that when these books started coming out, he was the Doctor on television. Now let's think a little bit about what they do to your imagination as a child and how formative it is, because in the end, the books you've read and the TV you've watched become sort of blurred into one. You don't really quite know in your memory which was which. An example, here in this book, The Auton Invasion, the televised version being The Spearhead from Space, is this illustration of John Pertwee in a wheelchair, down a slope, outside the hospital, high speed, plaster over his mouth. Now, in a recent discussion with some Doctor Who fans, everyone asking each other, what was your earliest memory of the programme? I said, oh, that image of the Doctor going down the slope, that's my earliest memory of the programme. Seemed plausible to me because I do remember my sisters talking to the next door neighbour about this serial, or at least about its famous feature, which was the shop window dummies coming to life and terrifying people. So I thought, oh, my memory, that's it, that's my earliest memory. Then I recently came across the book again and the drawing inside and thought, so my memory may not have been of the TV programme. My memory was probably of reading the book and looking at the illustrations over and over again. So actually the books and the TV serial, you have to start thinking of them as one kind of integrated journey in the child's mind. I'll give another example of the same phenomenon. This was a very popular TV serial, The Sea Devils, with quite well executed monsters. Some would debate that, but I think they're quite well executed monsters. And I'm going to pick one illustration. Rather than read these things out, it's just easier to show you on a video some illustrations. And here is a sea devil's hand coming through a panel, a broken panel, inside a submarine. And it says, the thing like a flash lamp suddenly blazed red, 4 ratings fell dead. So I've just discovered that seafarers could be called ratings. As a child, your vocabulary grew these ways. But the mention of a flash lamp and then the blazing red with a beam that looks like something from Star Trek or something. You didn't really see much of that kind of thing in Doctor Who in that era. So, and here's an image on the front cover of the same weapon. So what did the TV show actually show? Of course, that becomes your memory as a child. You'll never see the program again as far as you know. So you think that that's what you've seen on TV. Then years later the video comes out, and actually what comes out to the front of the weapon is a puff of smoke and a few sparks and probably a sound effect. And it's just not quite the super impressive Star Trek style death ray that your childhood memory has formed. So in a way, the books become more formative than the TV show in the child's imagination, which just shows actually that if you're not reading books, your imagination's not being stimulated quite as much as you thought. And these are really, a lot of effort's gone into these books. So this one, the Doomsday Weapon, you can see it's quite tight print. And they're not just rehashes of the script. So for example, when I first read this one, it's the first one I acquired, I'm sure, as a child. It has an introduction to the Doctor's companion called Joe Grant, but that introduction was never on TV. And I remember reading the book and being really quite confused as to why this book had this complicated, or well, seemed complicated, introduction to the Joe Grant character that I'd never remembered, because as far as I knew, she was new on TV. So anyway, the books had this license to be a bit more creative and depart from the television script, which I think is a good thing. Anyway, I'll leave that with you just for a moment and enjoy the images and tune in again. Thanks very much.